The day Ethan brought his first love home, I was being resuscitated in the hospital. Everything was within my expectations, including my death. Finally, with red eyes, he knelt and begged me to see her one last time. I threw my phone on the couch and took a deep breath. The trending news was filled with congratulations and praise, truly the golden couple. It was as if everyone had forgotten that I was the rightful Mrs. Hayes. The girl in the photo was Ethan's first love, Summer Hayes, the one he had loved unrequitedly for 10 years. The phone rang. "Aura, working late tonight. Don't wait for me. Go to bed early." Ethan's voice wasn't its usual distant tone. There was a subtle joy he tried to suppress. I hadn't had time to speak before the phone was hung up. I lit the candles on the cake. The faint light flickered and slowly died out. The frosting had melted into a mess, and the two little figures holding hands on the cake's surface had now turned into a colorful puddle, flowing across it. I felt a sudden wave of nausea, as if the hands linked with Ethan on the TV were choking my throat. It was deep into the night when Ethan returned home. He picked me up, feigning sleep on the couch. He carried a unique musky scent, which was Summer Hayes' favorite perfume. I pushed Ethan away and quickly drank a glass of water, suppressing the surge of sourness in my throat. "Aura, did I wake you?" Ethan rarely showed such a tender expression, as if suppressing a hint of guilt. I pointed to the cake on the table. "Today is our wedding anniversary. The cake has melted, what a pity." Ethan's expression gradually stiffened. "I'm sorry, my company is too busy." I interrupted his explanation. "Summer Hayes is back, right?" Ethan lowered his head. "She's divorced, and here I'm her only friend. I'll take you to celebrate our wedding anniversary this weekend. Today was truly just an accident." I smiled, which was taken as acceptance. Ethan had loved Summer Hayes for 10 years, and I had loved Ethan for 15 years. Ethan and I were childhood sweethearts. When I was 13 during PE class, I got my first period, and my pants were stained with blood. Ethan carried me directly to the infirmary. No matter how much I called out to him, he wouldn't listen. Finally, the school nurse gave me a sanitary pad. Ethan, who was a germaphobe, took off his jacket and tied it around my waist before returning to the classroom. The whispers and unpleasant stares made me blush. I turned to look at Ethan, who was sitting in the corner, and he happened to look up at me. It felt like an eternity. A young girl's first crush is always so irrational. At that time, I thought that eye contact was a mutual journey for us, but childhood bonds often falter when someone new arrives. In high school, a beautiful transfer student arrived and became very popular within a week, even overshadowing the senior cheerleading captain. Ethan, who used to wait for me after school and walk me home, became head over heels in love with someone else. The first time, he said club activities were busy and told me to go home early. Before I could retort, he took me to the school entrance. The second time, he said the school band had rehearsal and outsiders weren't allowed. But I clearly saw that transfer student, Summer Hayes, sitting on his piano bench, playing the piano he never let anyone else touch. The third time, there was no third time. After that day's rehearsal, Ethan and Summer Hayes were together. He vanished from my world, and he no longer used my nickname to call me. I understood he was deliberately avoiding me. In the days that followed, I also intentionally avoided him. When my parents asked, I vaguely brushed them off with the excuse of class changes. Back to the present, Sunday morning, the kitchen was filled with fragrant aromas. Ethan was wearing my kitten-patterned apron, looking somewhat amusing. 3 years of marriage, this was the first time he cooked for me. He was an extremely proud person. I once joked that even if he went bankrupt one day, he would still cut his burger with a knife and fork at a fast food restaurant. Lost in thought, Ethan called me several times, but I didn't hear him. On the table was savory porridge. It was delicious. I smiled sweetly. If only time could stop right here. After the meal, we prepared to go to the sunflower field. Seeds we had planted together when we got married. 3 years had passed, and sunflowers had finally grown. Ethan's phone suddenly rang. A sweet female voice on the other end seemed to be crying. It was Summer Hayes. Ethan's expression was visibly panicked. He grabbed his jacket and was about to leave. I grabbed Ethan's hand. "Can't you not go? You promised to make up for our wedding anniversary today." Ethan looked at me, then resolutely shook my hand off. "I'll be back soon, wait for me." He walked out the door without looking back. That day, Ethan didn't return home until deep into the night. I received a video. Ethan turned his head in the kitchen, his face flushed, and gently said to the camera, "Don't mess around." Summer Hayes giggled. ending the video. Then sent a text message. The soup he made was delicious. I didn't look at the phone anymore. I put the finished cake back in the refrigerator. What a pity, another cake wasted. I was vomiting violently in the restroom, while my husband was enjoying a peaceful time at his first love's house. I called Ethan several times, but no one answered, just like that day 10 years ago. At that time, Summer Hayes sprained her ankle, and Ethan carried her home on his back. On the way home, I encountered some local troublemakers. I knew the leader, Mark. He had pursued me and was beaten up by Ethan. I nervously swallowed, stepping back little by little, until I hit the cold, slick wall, the damp moss sticking to my hands reminding me that I had nowhere left to retreat. That day, they surrounded me, examining me like an object, mocking and insulting. After an unknown amount of time, Mark waved his hand, and with his cronies, left in a swaggering group. I picked up mud-stained clothes and scattered books. After that day, I fell ill. At that time, Ethan was at Summer Hayes' house helping her organize her notes. So, someone who sprained her ankle couldn't even write anymore. I told my parents and Uncle Charles' Aunt Susan that I just fell on the road. They then demanded that Ethan accompany me home every day after school, no matter what. Ethan was clearly annoyed, but had no choice. He looked down at me. Aura, those little tricks won't work on me. Now, Ethan no longer expresses his annoyance, so obviously, but actions don't lie. I began to try and face Ethan's change of heart. He moved out of the house, saying work was too busy, and he'd be staying at the company for a while. Good, that way I wouldn't have to avoid him when taking my medication. Half a month ago, I was diagnosed with liver cancer.
I didn't have much time left.
My brother invited a liver specialist from abroad. I really wanted to cooperate with the treatment, but things went against my wishes, and my condition worsened. Before I could tell Ethan this devastating news, Summer Hayes returned. The first day Ethan moved out, he called me. I took painkillers, tried to maintain my usual tone, ignored the sweet female voice on the other end of the phone, feigned ignorance, and told him to eat on time. After hanging up the phone, I saw Summer Hayes had sent me another message. This is the restaurant you had always wanted to visit with Ethan, right? I frowned, not wanting to reply. Summer Hayes always so easily took everything I loved. The 18-year-old Ethan I deeply loved, and my 28-year-old husband, Ethan. A mere glance or a snap of her fingers was all it took for Ethan to drop everything. But I hated her not just because of Ethan, but also because she was my sister. After high school graduation, my parents told me they had been divorced for 3 years and had kept it a secret so I could focus on finishing high school. Summer Hayes was the daughter of the woman Mr. Parker married. Her mother stole Mr. Parker, and she stole the person I loved. Nominally, I should call her sister. Originally, she already had everything I once possessed. But that year, she abandoned Ethan and the three of them left the country, along with Mr. Parker and Brenda Hayes, the three of them. No one knew why she left. From then on, Ethan searched frantically for any trace of Summer, as if he'd gone mad, but Summer Hayes, once she made a decision, she never looked back. Half a year later, Ethan gave up searching for Summer Hayes. He frequented various social gatherings, entertained any woman who came his way, but never took them home. When he had too much to drink, he would call me. He didn't need to say anything. I would still insist on taking him home, heavy rain, even during my period or when I had stomach flu. Sometimes, I would even drop off the women he met at the party first. Ethan and I got together because of an accident. That day, he was extremely drunk. After returning home, he kept calling out Summer, a name he never mentioned when sober. He said, "Summer, didn't you say you hated me drinking? You said you'd make a scene and embarrass me in front of my friends, but I've drunk so much. Why aren't you here yet?" I, holding the sobering drink, listened to this talking to himself from behind. Ethan finally discovered my presence. He waved his hand, discarding the sobering drink, and hugged me tightly. "Summer, you're back." My outstretched hand paused in midair. A few seconds later, I gently wrapped my arms around his waist. He pulled me onto the bed. I didn't refuse, even though he mistook me for Summer Hayes. On the 5th day Ethan moved out, I also moved out. Tonight, a gala invited us as a couple. I felt like I hadn't seen him in a long time. Upon closer calculation, it had only been 5 days. He was radiant, making me appear even more haggard. Of course, he didn't notice. I linked my arm through his, as if there had never been any estrangement between us. Perhaps Ethan genuinely thought so. He had long been accustomed to my always agreeable nature and never bothered to hide the signs of other women's advances towards him. I had never complained either. But this time was different. That person was Summer Hayes. People kept coming forward to toast. I smiled as I faced those trying to network, but he had, at some point, walked away again. The bald man in front of me spoke with great eloquence about his grand ambitions. Out of politeness, I kept smiling and listening to his grandstanding, but when I turned my head, I saw Ethan standing in the corner, with a woman playfully snatched the wine glass from his hand beside him. Ethan merely smiled, gently pinched her cheek, then seemed to realize something and glanced around. A large hand reached out in front of me. I came back to my senses, my upper right abdomen suddenly aching intensely. I found a couch and sat down. The couch to my right suddenly sagged. I turned my head to see a somewhat familiar man. Perhaps my overly pale face startled him. He helped me call 911. I didn't refuse. When the ambulance arrived, he put his jacket over me. As I lay in the ambulance, Ethan was opening the car door for Summer Hayes. The ambulance drove past him, and he looked up in my direction. I instinctively covered my head, only then realizing that Ethan wouldn't even notice me. This was the last time I saw him while I was still conscious. When I woke up, I was still lying in the hospital room. I struggled to leave the hospital. I didn't want to spend my final moments here. A man sat by the bed. I didn't know what he and the doctor discussed, but the doctor left. He walked into the hospital room, his intense gaze filled with pity. I thought I should recognize him, but I truly couldn't recall who he was. He took me back to my new apartment and took the spare key to my home. This was his condition for taking me out of the hospital. I had only moved into this new apartment a day ago, yet it felt as if I had lived here for over a decade. The fresh sunflowers in the familiar room were like a ray of sunshine illuminating the space and a corner of my heart. I sneezed. My nose felt a bit itchy. Ethan really disliked flowers. To be precise, he was unwilling to give me flowers, so in 3 years of marriage, I had never received any. Even the wedding venue was decorated with artificial flowers, superficial, just like their outwardly brilliant love. This man said he was Uncle David. Oh, right, I remembered that name. We had met before at the wedding. He was Ethan's younger uncle. He took the keys and never disturbed me, delivering 3 meals a day on time. Sometimes, I would suddenly doubt if I had ever left the hospital, just moved to a private hospital room. When I realized my health was deteriorating, Summer Hayes came to see me. Summer Hayes looked me up and down. The confusion in my eyes grew. Summer Hayes, what exactly are you doing here? Summer Hayes's tone was flat. Aura, I came to tell you that we're returning to the US soon. I covered my ears. Just leave then. Why do you have to come here and flaunt yourself? Before Summer Hayes finished speaking, the sound of a key unlocking the door was heard outside. Uncle David stood at the door, holding a food container, watching us stare at each other. I first linked my arm with Uncle David's, took the dinner, and said in a voice that even I found sickening, Uncle David, what took you so long? I'm starving. After saying that, I pouted and looked at him. Summer Hayes was clearly shocked. Uncle David stroked my hair. Be good, eat first. I'll handle this here. He pulled Summer Hayes outside the door, their voices growing louder and louder. Summer Hayes's voice suddenly rose. You clearly know. Her words were cut short by Uncle David's loud interruption. After an unknown amount of time, Summer Hayes left, giving me a resentful look before she went. I calmly continued eating the dinner Uncle David had brought. My appetite had recently improved, although I inevitably ended up throwing it all up. I started experiencing pain at night that prevented me from sleeping. Before I passed out from the pain, I called Uncle David. When Uncle David arrived, he was soaked. I couldn't sleep even after taking painkillers and was unwilling to go to the hospital, so I asked Uncle David to tell me a story. Uncle David opened a notebook and read in a soft tone, I have a secret. It's a star in the sky. That star was very dazzling, but one day, another equally bright star appeared next to it. I watched the 2 stars fall together, appear together. This star no longer belonged to me alone. The stars descended to Earth together. In the dark corner, I hoped the stars' light would shine on me, but the stars will eventually return to the sky. I once owned a star for a day. This time, its light is enough to illuminate a lifetime. Uncle David's voice was a bit choked. I recovered from the pain and had the energy to mock him. Uncle David, this isn't your diary, is it? Uncle David remained silent. I continued to laugh. Looks like it's unrequited love. but at least you had it, right? He looked at me and hugged me tightly. A warm current flowed down my neck, gradually turning cold. I couldn't quite recall how many days had passed. Ethan hadn't contacted me during this time. He must have seen the divorce papers I signed. To be honest, I regretted it a bit now. If I didn't get divorced, Ethan would refer to me as his deceased wife later. If we did, I would be his ex-wife. Whether I was alive or dead wouldn't matter. How would Ethan tell Summer Hayes? Would he say I clung to him and took advantage of his vulnerability, or that he was moved by me and filled his emptiness? Or perhaps they would choose to forget me, keeping silent. Uncle David still stayed here every day, telling me his story. A story of unrequited love that never saw the light of day, just like my past. Uncle David would cry bitterly every time he read his diary. Although it's a bit tragic, do you have to cry like this every time? I watched a full pack of tissues being used up again and couldn't help but mock him. Uncle David wiped his tears. I was young and blind back then. I didn't know how to choose people. All right, Uncle David. You know, I don't have many days left. Before I finished speaking, Uncle David's face suddenly filled my vision. Uncle David expressed his dissatisfaction with my words through his actions. This kiss was very familiar. Feeling somewhat annoyed, I pushed him away, took a deep breath, and sent him out the door. The next day, Uncle David came with fresh sunflowers to apologize. I was too impulsive yesterday. Forget it. What does a dying person have to quibble over? Actually, as Ethan's uncle, Uncle David really didn't need to put so much effort into me. Whether out of family affection or... Thinking of this, I suddenly realized that I had already divorced Ethan. Uncle David and I truly had no relation at all. Why else would he take such good care of me? Could I be the one he secretly loved in his diary? I looked at Uncle David's face. If someone like Uncle David had secretly loved me in my youth, I probably would have been very happy. Uncle David saw me in a daze and looked a bit nervous. Aurora. He called me Aurora. This was a name only Ethan had ever called me. The face in front of me became increasingly familiar. I felt like I was hallucinating. Uncle David turned into Ethan. When I woke up, I was in the bedroom, with several doctors nearby. Seeing me wake up, Uncle David's surprise was undisguised, from his eyes to his expression. In fact, this uncle cared for me far more than Ethan. Uncle David, I want to see the sunflowers. I made a strange sound. The people who looked like doctors nodded at this. Uncle David's eyes suddenly reddened. He promised to take me to see the sunflowers the next day. I put on my favorite white dress, applied my prettiest makeup, and went to the sunflower field with Uncle David, as if they were a couple. That sunflower patch was planted by Ethan and me after we got married. For 3 years, they hadn't bloomed annually, but this year, the farmer caring for them told me they had opened and asked when I and Mr. Hayes would come to see them. I saw this sunflower patch. I asked Uncle David to go a little further away, and I stayed there alone. The sun moved from east to west, and the sunflowers turned from east to west. Aurora. His voice was getting closer, but I couldn't clearly see his face. Well, Ethan, I finally returned you to Summer Hayes. Aurora was diagnosed with mental illness before she was diagnosed with cancer. Next, I will tell you the truth of the story. I am Summer Hayes. 7 years later, I received a phone call from Aurora. Back then, Brenda Hayes intervened in Mr. Parker's family, so after high school graduation, I didn't hesitate to agree to my stepfather's suggestion to emigrate. I didn't dare to see Aurora, nor Ethan again. Ethan, someone who can't tolerate deceit, would surely be utterly disappointed in me. Aurora said that she and Ethan had been married for 3 years. She said she had fallen in love with someone else, and she didn't want Ethan anymore. I clenched my fist, my nails digging into my palm. I knew she hated me, because Ethan, whom she liked, was with me, and her father also became my father, taking us abroad. So he would rather hurt the one he loved than get back at me. I immediately chose their wedding anniversary to return here. When I saw Ethan at the airport, I thought I had won. The media was there, so I deliberately twisted my ankle. Ethan put his arm around me and we left, as photographers snapped pictures. I asked him if he wanted to clarify. He frowned, saying, "Don't bother with them." I secretly delighted that his favoritism was just as it had been 8 years ago, without any reason. We went to a restaurant, one I had always wanted to visit with Ethan. Ethan was across from me. I talked about the past, filled with emotion. "Do you remember that New Year's party? I sprained my ankle at the party, and you carried me home, walking several kilometers on your back." Ethan, who had been looking down, suddenly looked up. His eyes were completely devoid of warmth. For a moment, I thought I had misread him. On a second glance, he was clearly smiling as he said, "Let's eat first." I suddenly panicked. I took a picture of them and sent it to Aurora, announcing my return, but Aurora didn't reply. Just as she said, she seemed to have truly fallen in love with someone else, but Ethan wasn't as I imagined. He was very busy, so busy that he was nowhere to be seen. Things developed completely differently from what I had imagined. I started to panic. That weekend, I feigned an accidental call to Ethan's phone. Sorry, I dialed the wrong number. I feigned weakness, and he, as expected, grew anxious. Half an hour later, he appeared at my house to make savory porridge for me. This kind of tactic was something I disdained 8 years ago, which is why Ethan so easily believed my words. But such tactics could only be used once. After that, no matter if I was sick or revealed some of my deeply hidden longing, Ethan was indifferent. He stayed at the company, not coming to see me, nor returning to see Aurora. But I wasn't reconciled. I tried to use their shared memories to rekindle his past feelings. I went to a business gala. I hadn't seen Aurora in 8 years, and she hadn't changed at all. If it weren't for Ethan, I actually quite liked her. She was very quiet, but standing there, even in a corner, she wouldn't be ignored. During their school days, Ethan still thought of her even when he was with me. I didn't want her near Ethan, so I subtly suggested to some local troublemakers to deal with her. Mark knew his limits. He neither hurt Aurora nor made him keep their distance from me and Ethan. But I overlooked their parents. Their parents demanded that Ethan safely escort Aurora home, so I hated her even more. I casually told Ethan that Aurora wasn't very friendly to me, probably just a little unaccustomed to losing a brother figure. Someone as clever as Ethan quickly assumed that Aurora had deliberately injured herself to hinder me and Ethan. Some say the more obstacles a relationship faces, the more intensely the individuals involved cling to it. She and I were racing against time, with a defiant spirit that said, "You won't let us be together? We'll be together anyway." Sometimes I would suddenly wonder, did Ethan truly love me, or was he simply rebelling? Ethan was very panicked when he saw me at the gala. Why was he panicked? Aurora didn't want him anymore, so what stir could my appearance cause? A middle-aged man stopped me and talked to me, his words suggesting he wanted to financially support me. I didn't kick him in his gut, because I saw Ethan kept glancing over at them. Just as the man's hand was about to touch my waist, Ethan appeared. He dismissed the man, his tone displeased. "Summer, what are you doing here?" "You know, an old acquaintance has a few old friends here. Just chatting." I crossed my arms over my chest, feeling a bit forced. After listening, Ethan's brow furrowed even deeper. I noticed the red wine in the glass in his hand. If that's all, I need to go mingle with some other people. I pushed away the red wine he offered and continued walking forward, counting 1, 2 silently in my mind. Ethan pulled me back. "Let me go with you." Where he couldn't see, I revealed a victorious smile. The gala didn't end smoothly. Someone fainted, and the ambulance arrived. I watched the ambulance leave, then suddenly saw Ethan next to me, looking uneasy. Only the next day did I learn that the ambulance had taken Aurora last night. Aurora had cancer. Ethan stayed by her side for a month in the hospital, as if he'd gone mad, but all the doctors said Aurora was beyond saving. I suddenly remembered Aurora's phone call, when she said she had fallen in love with someone else and didn't want Ethan anymore. Aurora, you've learned to lie. What an achievement. When I heard this news, I went to Ethan's house to see her. This was their marital home. A marital home without its owner. While Ethan was away, Aurora had also moved out, leaving behind only a divorce paper signed by Aurora. Ethan opened the refrigerator and suddenly broke down crying. An unattractive cake. He devoutly put the already melted frosting cake into his mouth, almost gagging, yet forced himself to swallow it, bite by bite, until finally he was stuffing it into his mouth haphazardly. His hands and face were covered in frosting. He ate with a vacant stare, tears streaming down his face, looking utterly disheveled. I pulled him away and yelled at him. "Ethan, stop eating. What are you doing?" Ethan slumped, collapsing onto the chair. This was the cake she made herself, twice. That weekend I said he would accompany her to make up for their wedding anniversary. Ethan looked up, his bloodshot eyes staring at me, as if I was an enemy. I instinctively stepped back. Ethan stood up, an unfamiliar sense of oppression emanating from him. Summer Hayes, if time could turn back, I would rather have never met you 10 years ago. With that, Ethan returned to the bedroom alone. I finally understood that the 8 years of absence could not be compensated for by the passionate youthful affection of those days. Just as Aurora said, she didn't want Ethan anymore, and Ethan no longer loved me. A month later, Aurora finally woke up, but she had forgotten what Ethan looked like. She didn't recognize the man who took her out of the hospital as Ethan. The doctor said that patients with hepatic encephalopathy can experience confusion and disorientation. Summer Hayes and Ethan had an argument at Aurora's new apartment. Aurora didn't recognize Ethan but recognized Summer Hayes. Before I could say anything, I was kicked out by Ethan. Go back to where you belong. I don't want to see you again, and neither does she. I was stunned. You clearly know she's dying. I know. That has nothing to do with you. You can go. Let's never see each other again in this lifetime. She doesn't want to see you. With that, Ethan turned and left, closing the door. Through the window, I saw Aurora smiling at Ethan in the room. Exactly like Aurora from my memories at 18. I finally felt utterly defeated. Aurora, you won.